Hello, Cousin Johnny here. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the Buzzin' with Cousins show. We thank you. Thank you, that garlic stuff. If you like garlic, you're going to love it. Put it on just about anything. That garlic stuff. Tuesday, Alvarado Farmers Market, or go to thatgarlicstuff.com. Thank you. Thank you, Art. I Heart You Candles, located right in front of Fisherman's Wharf. Beautiful hand poured candles. These are very inspirational candles. Call Sherry at 574-9446, right in front of Fisherman's Wharf. They're great. Thank you, Max Fit Meals, 520 Fremont Street. Grab and go healthy meals. They're delish. On your way from home from work, go grab some, heat them up, and fantastic. Thank you, Suds Cyber Laundry, 709 Lighthouse, Pacific Grove. Great modern machines, big screen TV, coffee, and a great friendly staff. Thank you, Suds. Thank you, the Whiskey Club, 425 Alvarado Street. Over 400 whiskeys to choose from. Go in, relax, have a drink. They have a bottle shop. They have room for special events. The Whiskey Club, thank you. Thank you, storyteller, author, and all-around good guy, Tony Albano. Tony has written 3 books, the latest being Cherish, about a New York teenager and a nun find love. Thank you, Tony. And if you want to order the book or find out more about Tony, go to Tony, Tony, Albano, Albano, storyteller.com. Check it out. Thank you. Hello, how's everybody doing out there today? Cousin Johnny here, bringing you another show. Hope everybody's doing good. Today we got a special show and a special guest. Tomorrow, July 7th, was a historical day in Monterey, in the United States, and in California. It was when California was claimed to be a state. So here with me today is Monterey historian Tim Thomas. We're so lucky to have him on, and we're going to talk about, they call this event Sloat's Landing. So please welcome Tim Thomas. Hey, Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing good, Cousin Johnny. How are you doing today?
Great. I really appreciate you coming on. And I know you've been on a couple, 3 times, and every time you come on, we just love it because we're like a sponge with the Monterey history. Also, we thank you for what you do with the community preserving this history here of Monterey Peninsula. So thank you for that. Well, so Tim, take us down memory lane on early California. And
just one quick correction. So California did not become a state on July 7th, 1846.
Okay.
But it just sort of started to lead to that statehood. So we went to war with Mexico. So I want all your viewers and listeners to hearken back to their high school social studies class, and perhaps they'll remember this term, manifest destiny, from sea to shining sea. So the United States always had its eye on California. And so in the spring of 1846, we kind of forced this war down there on the Rio Grande, down there in Texas. And we do go to war with Mexico. And the commanders of the Pacific and the Navy always had standing orders that if we went to war with Mexico, they were to sail their ships up into to Monterey and take the town of Monterey, because Monterey was the capital for of Northern California, or Alta California for Mexico at that time. 1846, a guy named John Drake Sloat was the commander of the Pacific. He was then off the coast of Mazatlan. Heard these rumors. We had indeed gone to war with Mexico, although he wasn't really sure about it. I mean, he didn't have email or CNN or anything like that. So he was a little hesitant about it, but he sailed his ships from Mazatlan, and they came into Monterey Harbor on July 1st, 1846, and they sat out there for about a week. Because again, he was a little hesitant about the whole thing. And at that time, Sloat was about 60 and his health wasn't all that great. But he finally was convinced by Thomas Larkin, who many of you probably know the story of Thomas Larkin. He was a merchant who lived here in Monterey. Thomas Larkin was well received within the Mexican community at that time, partly because Larkin, I always thought Larkin was a pretty smart guy, because Larkin would actually loan money to folks in Monterey at that time. So because the economy in Monterey really depended a lot on the hide and tallow trade. So if your listeners ever read Richard Henry Dana's 2 Years Before the Mast, which is a book I highly recommend for those of you who had not read it, has the best descriptions of California and Monterey in the 1830s that exist. And Dana hated Monterey, I might add, hated California. But he wrote these wonderful descriptions. But the hide and tallow trade, of course, selling cowhides and that kind of thing, and they would come in, collect these cowhides. And that's why Larkin would loan money out to these ranchers before they would sell their cowhides. And so Larkin was the guy who eventually convinced Sloat, yes, indeed, we were at war with Mexico. And so on July 7th, he sent his Marines in, and they raised the flag over that custom house. And there was no real resistance coming from the Mexican side of this, because they kind of knew this was going to happen. In fact, there was no Mexican flag for them to take down. And then they raised the American flag, and we went to war with Mexico. And also at that time, Monterey, along with thousands of acres of the West, then became a territory of the United States. But we still had that war to deal with that went on for a few years until by 1848, when they finally did sign the Treaty of the Guadalupe de Hidalgo, which essentially what it meant was the United States purchased the New Mexican territory and Northern California territory for about $15 million. And we became part of the United States. We still weren't a state yet, but we became a part of the United States.
So we were a territory. We became a territory, and it led eventually for statehood. So yeah, thank you for correcting me on that.
They left a guy named Walter Colton, who came to Monterey about a week after Sloat did. And Walter Colton was a Navy chaplain, and he was left in charge of the town, what they called the alcalde. Essentially, he was the mayor and judge of the town. And he also wrote a wonderful book called My 3 Years in California, which is kind of sort of his daily life here in Monterey. And another book I highly recommend. You can find it online, actually, and read it. And he's the guy that built, of course, Colton Hall, where they finally do draft the California State Constitution, which they did in the fall of 1849. They drafted it there. And then in October of 1849, they signed, October 13th, actually, 1849, they signed the Constitution. And one of the great myths about Monterey is that Monterey was never the state capital when we became a state. And that was by design, because the signers of the Constitution did not want Monterey to be the state capital, because, and this is their words, they felt that Monterey was a Mexican town. They wanted to move away from that idea, and so the capital went to San Jose, then went to Benicia, goes back to San Jose, and eventually goes to Sacramento. But anybody who's lived here, we're all spend time at the Del Monte Shopping Center, and that actually stayed open until 1967. They left it open like that because they always had this plan that they would bring the state capital to Monterey, and that's where they're going to put it there.
Oh, wow. That's
but
crazy.
Luckily, we're really happy they never did all that kind of thing.
That's really,
all because of John Drake Sloat in sending his Marines. And Sloat never actually got off his ship and came in onto Monterey. He finally left Monterey about a week after all that.
Now they celebrate that every
They do,
year. Do they have like a reenactment?
they do have
Typically,
reenact. Goes back to 1896. And the first reenactment was 50 years, 50th anniversary. What I love about that particular time was that the very first one is that there were still sailors alive who were with Sloat in 1846 who came to help celebrate that, and they recreated the whole thing. So when Sloat first came in and they raised the flag over the custom house, the flag actually got caught in what they call the halyards when they were raising it to the flag,
yeah,
and, and the corporal had to shimmy up that pole to unhook it, right? And well, that guy was still alive, and he was here in Monterey. And sure enough, when they raised it in 1896, it also got caught in the halyards, and he shimmy up the pole again. He was an old guy at that point, and he unhooked it, and they raised it, all that. But also, what happened at that time was the Native Sons of the Golden West, which is a fraternal organization, and they're still around.
yeah,
They at that time wanted to raise money to build a monument to all of this, and so they started on that date in 1896. They're going to put on the top of the lower Presidio there, and so they began to raise money. They actually at that time they were asking for donations of $10, which actually was a lot of money for people in 1896 to do that. And it took a number of years to raise that money and other issues they had. And finally, in 1910, they actually unveiled the Sloat Monument that we have at the top of the hill up there now, although it looks different than what the original designers had planned.
yeah,
So
yeah.
anybody's been up there, and if you haven't, you should go up there because it's got wonderful views of the whole Monterey Bay up there to see that monument. But the monument is if you look at the monument, you see you'll notice all the names and different people. Those are all officials and folks who are involved in
Yeah,
the war with Mexico, and also the building of the monument. You'll see Larkin was part of that, and Walter Colton,
nice.
and different counties. But every county actually had to pay certain money, and they actually produced those blocks of stone. So there are all kinds of different rock work that goes around it. So some held up better than others. It's all very symbolic of how it's built, the number of stones that's there, and all that kind of
Great.
thing.
Yeah,
But it always looks kind of funny to me when you see it, because the
yeah,
original plan for that monument was it was supposed to be John Drake Sloat at the very top of it, pointing down to the custom house and big cannons
yes,
surrounding, doing all that. Well, the sculptor that they hired to do this work studio was in San Francisco. And of course, in 1906, April 1906, there was a massive earthquake and fire that destroyed much of San Francisco, including this artist's studio and all the things he'd already created for the statue, including Sloat. And so he went to the Native Sons of the Golden West and said, I don't know what you guys are going to do. And they didn't have the money for them to rebuild it again. And they didn't want to go around trying to raise more money to do it. And so he looks around his studio and says, I have this eagle. It
right.
survived. And so that eagle is how it ended up on the top of that rock there.
Wow, that is really great because I lived here all my life. I never knew the story, and we used to, as teenagers, used to say, to hang out, whatever, smoke cigarettes, whatever. It was like, let's go to the Eagle, and we'd all end up in the Eagle. But in reality, it was like, well, let's go to see Sloat.
The city of Monterey, eventually it's in their plans. They've been raising money to eventually repair the monument up there and repair all that rock work that needs to get fixed.
I think it'd be nice if they put Sloat up there. So
Well, that probably won't happen, but they'll at least fix the.
pointing or something. Now,
Yeah,
the Sloat, when they raise the flag, is right in front of the custom house. Can
right.
you just give us a couple minute little history of what the custom house is? If
Sure.
and tell
So,
people, hey, I'll meet you at the custom house.
so the
Some people
custom
don't even know what it is.
the Custom House, by the way, is state landmark #1, California.
Okay.
I thought that was a big special thing, but it turns out it's just sort of random that became state landmark #1. But it's a Custom House was built. We're not probably mid 1820s, built and built by the Mexican government. It was eventually, well, actually, there was a building there before that, but when this was when Monterey, California was part of Spain, they closed the ports here, and it was difficult to live here. I mean, they didn't allow, you could just come in, and it was, living in Monterey at that time under Spanish rule was like living on a deserted island. I mean, you would rely on this one supply ship that would come once a year, bringing you all the special food you'd like to eat, or bringing you letters from home, that kind of thing. And it was very difficult. And so in order for them to actually get soldiers to man the Presidio and to man the mission, they had to go to the prisons in Mexico and say, you guys can stay in jail or you can go to Monterey. And many chose to stay in jail. So it was very difficult. But in 1822, Mexico declares independence from Spain, and then we become part of Mexico. And one of the first things they did was to build that custom house, open those ports. And what that custom house was a tax house. So they'd tax all these ships that were coming in, mainly ships from the United States, that hide and tallow trade, right? They are coming in and they would tax them, all the cargoes they were bringing in. So if you lived in Monterey, in California, any ship coming in had to go to Monterey first, because Monterey was the capital of Northern California, to register that you were here. And then you could go about your business, and you would have to pay taxes on what cargo you had with you. And I've seen manifest of these ships. I mean, because they brought everything. There was no Target store or anything. You had to rely on these ships to bring you all this stuff, fabrics and building supplies and special kinds of foods, all kinds of fireworks, you name it, were on these ships. And so they would tax them. Sometimes they'd tax them up to 100% of their cargo. That's how they raise money. They would talk how the Mexican government would raise money. So oftentimes, some of these ships would actually unload their cargo, half their cargo, out on Carmel Beach where nobody was, then come into Monterey to do that kind of thing. And so during
I don't know where I was, but somebody was mentioning that they used to try to drop some stuff off at Spanish Bay.
Yeah, they would. They would unload. So people
somebody said that's how it got the name Spanish Bay.
I'm not sure but things would be unloaded in different, like in Carmel Beach, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay.
During the hide and tallow trade, they would come to get the hides, cow hides, and cow hides represented $1, and they were referred to as California bucks. And the sailors would line up in the custom house across down where that beach is, next to the wharf today, and they would then pass them over one by one by one. You've all heard that term. We're passing the buck. We're passing.
Yeah. Okay. Oh wow, that's great. That is really great.
Get them onto that ship, and then they would send them back to the United States, mainly to Boston, where they would then in turn be used to make saddles and other kind of leather products. Actually, the big product were shoes. They came out of those cow hides. The big product, to me anyway, was big leather conveyor belts that would go into factories that are turning machinery parts and making other products. It comes back to California. So it kind of works like in a big circle there. So the custom house is a very important building.
That is really great. It's something I learned. I just learned something now, and I lived here all my life. But Tim, I appreciate you giving us the information on Sloat. Do you still do your tours, right?
Still do walking tours. I do them usually on the first Saturday of every month. They're free tours, I might add.
They are?
They are now, and they start at 10 o'clock. But you have to make a reservation, because I have to know that you're going to be there.
And that's on your website or your.
I have a website, but you can email me at timsardine@yahoo.com. And
timsardine@yahoo.com. Sign up for first Saturday of the month for a walking tour. Is it the Fisherman's Wharf or?
Yeah, it's sort of a history of the Monterey waterfront. It's really a cultural history of Monterey.
Wow, that sounds fascinating. And I've taken not that tour, but I've taken other tours by Tim, and it is, you can be there all day listening to it because it's such fascinating history, especially if if you're a history buff just like me. So I love it. So Tim, I really appreciate you coming on again and giving us the history of Sloat because I've always kind of knew about it, but I didn't know the ins and outs. And one day a couple of years ago, I was riding my bike, and they had like a procession of like soldiers dressed in the 1800s, and I was going, "What's going on here?" And I go, "It's Sloat's Landing." And then there was like a little plaque on the right in front of the wharf.
One last thing. When I worked for the Maritime Museum, we had a big exhibit on Sloat, which actually sponsored by the Sloat family. And
wow,
we put that exhibit in. One of my goals was to find the actual flag that they flew over the custom house, because we knew he took it down and took it with him when they left. And I spent a long time, and I finally I was told that they had it at Annapolis at the museum. They have it in Annapolis, Maryland, at the Naval Academy. They have a beautiful museum there, and I talked to the curators there, but they didn't have it. So, and what we now think is that when Sloat died, it was buried with him, and that's where the flag is today.
Okay, great. Now, Tim, if somebody wants a different tour like Cannery Row or something, are you available for that too? Or?
No, I don't do them very often anymore. Sometimes I do a little video tour, but they can call me and we can talk about it.
Okay, so email Tim at if you're interested at timsardine at Yahoo. What was that email? Yahoo. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Tim Sardine. Okay, Tim, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And we will see you. And I got like a 2-minute clip of the soldiers marching down to the Custom House Plaza taken a couple of years ago. So here we go. Tim, thank you so much. And here we go.
Very
That was
good.
great. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you.
Um,
See you next
Tim,
time.
thank you everybody for tuning in. And Tim and I and Commodore Sloat are out. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.